November meeting. My name is Carrie Gray, and I am the safety consultant that works with the Medina County Safety Council. So this is very exciting. This presentation today, I've heard it actually twice, and it's still really good, even though this will be the third time, and I get something out of it every time I hear it. So you're going to be definitely happy to hear this. This is going to be some good information for you, especially with everything that's going on. Just a couple BWC updates. So if there's anybody new on here or anybody that I don't know, I am the safety consultant that works with Medina. So if you have anything that you're trying to figure out with safety or any training or any of that fun stuff going on right now, I can help you. I am mostly virtual. Sometimes they unchain me from the basement, but it's very occasional and it requires some begging and bartering, but I get to do some. So if there is an urgent need that you have, please, let me know and we can figure something out. We are doing stuff mainly virtual though. So if you have programs or training or anything like that that you're trying to get straightened out, I can help you and I can send you resources and we can talk and all that fun stuff. The one thing that I'm going to put in the chat in just a minute for everybody is a link to get to the BWC safety newsletter. And this newsletter, I just found this link. This is a newer, the newsletter's been around a while, but actually being able to get it delivered to you is a newer thing. And so this newsletter is pretty cool and it has anything new that's going on in the safety world and a lot of good resources and stuff that's relevant. So in just a minute, when I'm done talking, I'll drop that in the chat and you guys can sign up for that. So it's pretty cool. We do have a couple webinars coming up, 2 in December. I don't know the name of the fraud one, but it's on fraud, the second one there. And then in January, we're going to have a prevention through design that's coming up too. So I wanted to throw that in there. We have virtual classes still, and those are all free, no additional cost, and you can attend those at will if you want to. That's just kind of what we have coming up between now and the end of the year. The other thing, or the last thing that I have is just definitely keep in mind that there's a lot of resources out there. So we have sample programs, we have safety talks or toolbox talks, we have librarians, we have streaming videos, and you can see over there on the right-hand side, there's a new video that just got released last week on dealing with snow and ice and walking in snow and ice. And so we know this is a big issue. We love, I don't know about you guys, how happy you were, but we at our house got 3 inches of snow on Sunday. And just navigating that with workers, that can definitely be a big issue. There's a lot of a couple micro training videos that you can use, and that's one of the newer ones. So just know that that's there. I'm gonna stop sharing and I will throw that thing in the chat. The link to sign up for that program. Stephanie, did you have anything else on your slides that you wanted to make sure that you covered, or anything from that?
I didn't. I can pop it up at the end. It just has next month's meeting date and topic, but they were just kind of general housekeeping.
Okay, all right. Well then, with that fun and excitement, I'm going to turn it over to Deb Bailey and Rick Maj. If you could do me a favor, one is Stephanie just put a link to the respiratory program checklist that Deb and Rick are going to be talking about the entire presentation. So you're going to want to either have that open on another screen or print it off or something like that, but it's going to be a really good checklist that you want to use to help you navigate through this presentation today. Now, the other thing that I need everybody to do is down at the very bottom of your screen, you see a reactions button. All right, so I want everybody to go ahead and click on that reaction button, and you can see there's options. There's a clap hands, a thumbs up, a crying emoji. I think that's a shocked emoji, a heart, things like that. So I want everybody to click on that, and I want you to give a warm, and just because Deb is going to make you use these tools, so this is your first trial run, I want you to clap and give Rick and Deb a warm Medina County Safety Council welcome. And look, I see 9, I see 12. Look, keep going. There's 15 because there's 28 of us. So everybody make sure you're clapping, and I'll turn it over to Deb and Rick. Thank you.
All right. Whoops. Sorry, I got this. Minimize that a little bit.
You're good.
All right. So I'm having, gotta go back one.
We got to see the dog and the respirator. There we go.
So I'm going to minimize this, okay? Because Carrie, you're just going to have to monitor that because it's not showing up on that. So again, safety consultant, I do the same thing Carrie does, just in a different part of out of North Canton, just I have Summit and Stark County. And we kind of share Rick for industrial hygiene purposes. So we are going to talk a little bit today about respirators and face coverings and OSHA. Oh my, again, I love the picture that we have of the respirator. If you know what type of mask this is that the gentleman's wearing, the one that says safety first, industrial safety in 1632, type in the chat because it's an interesting one. And then, our friend, we want to make sure that our buddies, our fur babies don't have any issues. So, Rick, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I work with Deb and Carrie. I'm an industrial hygienist, so I concentrate more on the health hazards in the workplace, and I can conduct or help you conduct industrial hygiene, air, and noise surveys. And what I'd like to say about respirators in this day and age is, if you think about it, about a year and a half ago, the term respirator was probably only an industrial term. We didn't hear it in the mainstream media, but now it's at the forefront since COVID. Everyone knows just about everyone knows what an N95 is, whereas 2 years ago, nobody knew what an N95 except us safety geeks. So yeah. That's been probably the biggest change.
Absolutely. So here's a question for you guys, and you can type the answer in the chat. For OSHA 2021, what rank are respirator citations? So again, 1 being the top, 10 being the lowest. Out of the top 10, what ranking do you think they have?
So I got 1, 3. Everybody needs to type in here. So give us a number. There's no wrong. Well, there is a wrong, but we're not going to taunt you for it. 3, 2, 5, 8, 8, 5, 6, 4,
Perfect.
7. All right, all over the board. Good. Keep going.
Great. So the answer is, here's the top 10, and it is number 2. So whoever picked 2, I heard a 2 in there. Great. Shout out to them. They must have read the slides before. The bottom line is, still top 10, respirator protection's been up there. It's moved up in 2021. Gee, I wonder what could have been driven that, but we know that there were a lot of citations in nursing homes and places like that. So it's still one of the top cited standards, along with other things. Eye and face protection is number 8. So again, value added. I know you guys are looking at the top 10 with Medina this year is what we're going to cover. And that, again, is one of the top ones. That's obviously why we're here. So we're going to share with you some more information about respirators. Here's another type in the chat. And you all better know this one because it's the hotbed right now. So current OSHA COVID citations. Does OSHA have a COVID-19 standard? Just a yes or a no. We'll see what our responses are.
Yes, 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 yes. The emergency temporary standard. They all have been watching the news.
Yeah, you guys have been watching it. And what I will say about that is continue to watch it. Okay, we're waiting for the legal people to tell us what's going on. It's been stayed twice, so they're going to hear it. More than likely, it will go to Supreme Court, and we're just going to have to sit back and wait. I wanted to share, though, a little bit about a fact sheet that they have out on the COVID-19 testing and ETS. And again, this boils down to who does it apply to? And Rick and Carrie and I were talking about this before y'all joined us, is that it does apply to employers with 100 or more employees. And Rick, the determination on that was you might have 90 for 90% of the year, but as soon as you hit that 100 threshold, it applies all the time, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you have seasonal workers and you go up over 100, then you're covered.
So once you hit the mark, it applies. So keep that in mind.
And the key point of this whole emergency temporary standard is you can't enter the workplace if you're not vaccinated, or if you prefer not to be vaccinated, you have to have a weekly negative test.
And wear a respirator or wear a mask.
Or wear a face mask.
So it's an A and a B situation. And again, we'll wait and see how that all kind of pans out here. But currently, these are still standards that OSHA can cite on, regardless of what the ETS is. So they can still cite you for respirator protection plan. And again, when you look at it, let's look at respirator plan, bloodborne pathogens, record keeping, HAZCOM, PPE. I'm going to flip back real quick, and I want to say, okay, what were our top 10 right here? Record keeping, HAZCOM, respiratory, all on there, right? So again, top 10, these are things that are OSHA citing. So again, be aware of that. And then they can always utilize that general duty clause. Again, the 5A1, providing a workforce free of recognized hazards. Obviously, COVID is a recognized hazard, so they have the ability to enforce that.
So, is this a respirator? I
So
want
you
you
can
to
raise
your
give us a
hand
thumbs
if you
up.
think it is.
Yeah, give us a thumbs up. You guys have a thumbs up if you think it is.
There's also a green check or a red X. You can hit one of those in your things. I see red X, I see a no, I see a yes, I see a no, I see a bunch of thumbs up, I see a bunch of no's.
Okay.
Okay. Well, technically, this is considered a respirator. This is a kind of a weird looking N95 respirator. And what makes it a respirator is that this is a Niosh approved, certified N95 filtering face piece respirator. And there's markings on it. You can't really see on this one, but if you look at the strap, the blue strap, you can kind of see little printings, and that will tell you that it will have the Niosh approval number and probably say N95. We used to say if it had two straps, it was Niosh certified. That's kind of a rule of thumb. You got to be careful with that because there's a lot of different styles of a Niosh certified respirator. So what makes it certified is it's been tested, passed those tests, and it has an assigned protection factor. So here we have some examples of different types of N95 dust masks, they're often called, but they're the word for them is filtering face piece respirator. And basically what that means is the entire face piece is the filter, and you breathe through that filter. And it seals around the mouth. It can be fit tested, and when it gets dirty, you simply throw it away. So that's the advantages of using filtering face piece respirator. Go ahead.
And that is a key. Keep that in mind. When it gets dirty, you throw it away. Just want to remember that because we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. So is this counterfeit or real? What do you guys think? Let me ask if you say anything. Do you see anything on the packaging that might indicate that it might be counterfeit? I'm going to wait for some people to possibly. We did this, so you can actually circle the things that you might see. But does anybody see anything that might be an issue?
Someone said KN95.
That's right. And notice that it says a KN95, and then up on the packaging it says an N95. They're not one and the same. Again, this was actually when we were out and about during the we were doing the health department stuff. I actually found this in a store as you come in from overseas somewhere, and they were selling these as respirators, and we had a little conversation about what that meant, what that was supposed to be. Also notice that up at the top it says a 360-degree face protection, multi-layer of protection. So you can see up at the top it says, look, it protects you 360 degrees.
you can spin around with it on.
You can spin around, right? So here's some things that indicate. You heard Rick say that, you know, an actual Niosh respirator has a Niosh approval. It has markings and it has a certification on it. So if it does not have a Niosh marking or a filtering face piece, respirator, or headband, then it's not Niosh approved. It's probably fake. Now, some of the things we've seen are Niosh might be spelled wrong. So maybe it's N-O-I-S, no-ish, you know, maybe it says no-ish. Well, no-ish is not Niosh. So we have to look at what's on there and verify it. The presence of some kind of decorative fabric or other decorative add-ons like sequins and stuff, I can guarantee you Niosh is not going to approve anything that has little decorative add-ons onto it. Claims for the approval for children. Niosh does not approve any type of respirator protection for children. That's just based on, you know, lung capacity. If I'm not mistaken, that's what I've heard from physicians in the past. And filtering face piece respirator has ear loops instead of headbands. So there's just some signs that whatever we're purchasing. Go ahead.
That's confusing little sentence. Basically what it's saying is if it has ear loops, it is not Niosh certified.
Right.
It has to have the headband, the markings, obviously. So if you see anything with loops, it's not a respirator.
Right.
Correct. Here's some examples of some different types of air purifying respirators. These are often used with the term elastomeric respirators because they have like a rubber or plastic face piece, and they use cartridges or filters, and they're made to be reused if properly stored and cleaned. And you just replace the filters when they're due based on your change-out schedule. So you have on the left, the yellow one is a half face piece cartridge respirator. And then in the middle, you have the full face, which also protects the eyes. If you have a strong irritant, you might want a full face respirator. And then on the right, you have the powered air purifying respirator. A lot of people call them PAPRs. And basically, it doesn't supply oxygen. It just pumps clean air through filters into the mask and makes it easier to breathe. These can be either tight fitting, where you have a seal around the face like the other two, or it can be a loose fitting hood or helmet type design. So you'll see those both ways. The nice thing about the hood or the helmet is you don't have to fit test those.
Right. So remember that Rick said the nice thing about the loose fitting, the hood or the helmet, you don't have to fit test. When we start talking later, if you have folks that like no shave November because they're hunters, that's an option for them. I'm just saying. We'll get into the battle of beards a little bit here in a minute.
Here's an example of a couple supplied air respirators. You can either have an airline respirator that is connected to some sort of compressor, and this has to supply grade D breathing air. So you have to have protection on your compressor to ensure that it's delivering grade D breathing air to the wearer, or you have the SCBA, and that's not scuba, that's SCBA, which is self-contained breathing apparatus, like a firefighter use or hazmat people, where the grade D breathing air is in the canister. So which one?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Which one of these is a respirator? So answer in the chat. You should know it by now, hopefully. A, B, C, D, E, or F. Come on. Don't be afraid. Carrie won't yell at you.
I won't yell at you. F, F, F. They're all failing
Y'all
you.
there. 100%. F is a surgical N95, which in addition to passing the Niosh certification, is certified by the FDA for fluid resistance. All the other ones are just comfort masks or face masks. They are not considered respirators.
So this is where we were talking about that surgical mask, the F one that we were just saying. Again, it was approved by Niosh as a respirator, but it also was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, by the FDA, for surgical purposes. And we really just wanted to put a note in there that, you know, in industry, our folks are wearing respirators. They know they need to be Niosh approved. but we started to look into what happens in the surgical room, because again, there has to be some protocols. And what we found was that the FDA approves those, basically looking for, again, some of the differences. They're looking for fluid resistance, and provides the wearer protection against large droplet splashes or sprays of bodily fluids. It's also loose fitting, whereas the N95 is tight fitting, and then there's no fit test required on the surgical mask, but there is when we look at the N95. So let's talk a little bit about, and you guys have all heard this, I know you have, but I just want to reiterate, hierarchy of controls. When we're doing anything in industry to protect our people, we're looking at how do we eliminate the hazard, or how do we control the hazard. So the first line of defense is always going to be, let's eliminate the hazard if we can. So let's talk a little bit about solvent-based paint. Now, back in the day, everything was solvent-based. They were great paints. They worked really well, but they had a lot of nasty solvents in them. So the manufacturers said, okay, well, we can eliminate that. So what they did is they removed the solvent out of it, and they came up with what they called a substitution, something called a low VOC paint. Didn't necessarily not have any VOCs or organics, but it did have a lower amount of them in there, so the exposure wasn't quite as high. Now, the other look at we can take is we can say, okay, if we're painting that and we're using a low VOC, we're going to put that apparatus in a hood or in a spray booth somewhere where we're controlling it along with a ventilation system that's going to pull that out and keep our folks from getting exposed. Sometimes that's not even possible because there are some paints that are just based on what people had to do. I've worked with military specs in the past, and we had to paint with a mandated paint by the military, and it was what I called a nasty paint. It had a lot of solvents in it, so we had to use ventilation. We had to use that product. We had to have ventilation. We had to have a hood, and we had to have our people in respirators to do the spraying. So the other thing we can look at is we eliminate the amount of time that they're spraying. Instead of spraying 8 hours a day, maybe we only put them in there for 2 hours. Sometimes when you have to get a product out, that could become a problem, because now if I need 8 hours worth of spray, but I can't expose my people, or I don't want to expose them to maybe 8 hours, I might end up with 4 people in that booth doing the work of one person. So now there's an inherent problem with that, is that now I've got 4 people exposed instead of just 1. So you want to look at your administrative controls. And then the very last line of defense will be the PPE and will be the respirators. But I always want you to think of this, that, unfortunately, last line of defense is usually our first reaction of defense. So that's usually the first thing we think about. Oh, put a respirator on and we're good. If that's the only way you can do it, right, that's fine. But you want to evaluate all these other hierarchies before you step into that mode and go into the last line of defense. The other thing you have to consider about last line of defense, it is the only barrier between the employee and the exposure is wearing that respirator and making the assumption that they are putting it on properly and that it's properly maintained. And I
exactly that. The hazard is still there, right? The hazard's right there.
Absolutely. So, can the hazard be controlled? Talking about substitution, engineering controls, and administrative controls. And then, of course, we're going to look at respirators. And when we get into the respirators, we're going to look at 2 different programs. We're going to look at two different usage types, required usage or voluntary usage. So right now, I want you to take a minute and pull out your check sheet if you have it. Now I'm going to go over real quickly what this program will cover. And the check sheet is to help you decide, do we have all the elements of our respirator program completed, or is there something that we could improve upon, or maybe even something that we're missing? So just real quick, there are 18 steps. I'm going to read them real quick. Do you use respirators? Number 2, do you need to use respirators? Number 3 is mandatory to use respirators. And then there's an if yes, you go down to 4 and it says, do you have a written program? Number 5, have you completed medical evaluations? Number 6, have employees been fit tested? Number 7, training on proper use and care. And number 8, it says program administrator. Then we go down to, if no, then you go to steps 9 and 10, and it says, do you use respirators voluntarily, and are they elastomeric respirators? If that answer is yes, then you go down to 11 and say, are medical evaluations completed? 12 says, do you have written procedures on cleaning, storing, and maintaining? 13 says, do you train on proper use and care? And 14 says, do you train on Appendix D? And 15, are you using filtering face piece respirators or N95s? And then if the answer was yes to that above question, it says, do you train on Appendix D? Do you wear face coverings? And do you recommend training on face coverings? So those are all in there. And if you know that grid, it'll say, you might, the answers are, you can check it and say, I'm not sure. Yes, we have it, or ask someone else. That's your homework to help you guys get better at what do we need, and kind of like doing an evaluation of our current respirator program.
And the rest of the program will kind of cover those questions, so will help you answer those questions. So when should a respirator or respiratory protection be used? There's really 2 cases that make it mandatory that you have a complete respiratory protection program. If you as the employer require your workers, no matter the exposure, to wear a respirator, then you have to have the full-blown program. That's one. The other one is when you have employee exposures, you've measured them through industrial hygiene monitoring, maybe by me, maybe by you, maybe by someone else, and you have overexposures. When it exceeds the exposure limit, respiratories are then mandatory. In the case of engineering and administrative controls, if they're not feasible, respirators are mandatory because you can't bring those concentrations below exposure limits. You have to wear respirators while you're installing or repairing your engineering controls to bring down those exposures below the occupational limits. And then some specific standards like lead, asbestos, things like that might have their own specific respiratory protection requirements where you have to wear a respirator. But the 2 key things to remember is, do you require it as an employer? Or if you have overexposures, then you have to have the full-blown program.
So in those topics that Rick just hit on, those cover questions 1 through 3 on your check sheet. One thing I did want to point out, Rick mentioned technically feasible. Technically feasible, OSHA doesn't interpret me not wanting to purchase a ventilation system as technically not feasible. There's actually a protocol that you have to go through on OSHA's website on verifying how something is technically not feasible. So I just wanted to point that out to you folks. So again, remember, respirators are only for temporary use while engineering controls are being implemented, or if engineering controls are not feasible for operation. And I can't stress that enough. Again, remember, that's your last line of defense, and we're going to rely on the employee to maintain their respirator, wear it properly, and wear it during the whole time that they need to. So we're just going to talk a little bit about written programs. So in any workplace where respirators are necessary, we have to have a written program. Again, this is one that OSHA cites quite frequently. They shall establish and implement a written underscored respiratory program for worksite procedures. We actually have on our link, the one link that Carrie shared out there earlier was where our written programs are. There is a respirator program on there. So if you don't have one, if you're looking to revamp it, by all means, jump on there and take a look at that and see if that's something that you want to use. That is actually check sheet question number 4. Making sure that you do have a program. So now I'm telling you if you don't have one, but I'm also giving you the options, like there's one available. So don't panic. We're here to help you guys, and we're here to provide you with some additional services. So some of the other program requirements are proper selection. In other words, I just don't want to slap any type of respirator on a person. I have to look at what we're doing. and how we're doing it and what respirator is going to work best for them. You know, we talked about painting, and there's been a lot of times when people are using respirators and I tell them, it's like, you guys have to shave. And they look at me like I have 3 eyes, and they said, that's not going to happen. And I said, this might not be the right product for you guys. So there has to be a medical evaluation done also. We have to be properly fit tested. Again, when you think about it, a medical evaluation is basically your physician saying, okay, your lungs are healthy enough and your body is healthy enough to be able to wear that. Because when you put on a respirator, it does tax the body's system, okay? And it's going to cause some, you know, some increase in your breathing, your respiration. So you want to make sure that you're medically fit to be able to wear one. You want to make sure that it fits properly and that we're using it properly. We're using it for the right thing. A lot of times when we're out and about, when we were doing more out and about stuff, we would see respirators that weren't the right type of respirators for what the people were trying to protect themselves from. You also have to have the section that talks about inspection, cleaning, and storage. Breathing air quality, Rick talked about providing breathing air, and I will tell you that if you have to do that, that is a lot of documentation on making sure that breathing air is good breathing air quality. Training on that, program evaluation, and then record keeping. So you can see there's a lot of elements. And the one thing I will say that if you're not exceeding the threshold limits of a chemical and you're just kind of doing it because you want to do an extra for your folks, that can be very expensive. It can be time consuming and expensive. So you may want to look at some other options, like maybe making it a voluntary program only. We'll get into that a little bit later.
And it may also make the investment in engineering controls more affordable if you figure out the ongoing costs of a respirator program, which include not only the respirators and the cartridges and filters, but the annual fit test, the training, having a program administrator, the medical evaluations. Those costs add up and they're ongoing.
Absolutely.
Whereas
Absolutely.
if you can put that booth in that reduces those exposures and you can make it voluntary, you can keep your costs way down and also keep your people safer.
Absolutely.
So remember, that previous slide had actually 9 steps. So remember that, just keep that in your back of your mind. A written program has about 9 steps for compliance. So if that full-blown program is required, again, under 2 circumstances: when you have overexposures, documented employee overexposures, or you as an employer say, we just want our workers to wear that respirator because we want them as safe as possible. You need the full program. Once you implement the full program, respirators can be worn only after, think of this, after the employees have already had their medical evaluation and been cleared to wear the respirator, only after they've been trained in proper use, fit, care, and maintenance of that respirator, and only after they've been fit tested, clean shaven. So keep that in mind. Very important. OSHA says when respiratory protection is required, you have to do a medical evaluation. This doesn't mean they go necessarily to the doctor right away. It means they have to fill out a questionnaire that's attached to the standard. It's sent in, and a licensed healthcare professional evaluates it and determines if there's any follow-up. And then based on that follow-up, they may have to go in for a physical or certain types of tests, whatever the case may be. So it's medical evaluations are required when your program's required, and it must be done before the person puts on a respirator and is fit tested. So it is Appendix C of the standard, contains the medical questionnaire. We're going to talk in detail about required use and voluntary use. There is an exemption for the medical evaluation when you're using a filtering face piece respirator, i.e. the N95, and you're using it voluntarily. You don't have to do, that's the only exemption to the medical evaluation.
Notice that that's questions 5 and 11 on your check sheet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I keep forgetting about that.
Okay.
Your fit test must be done annually. And there's two types of fit tests. Qualitative, meaning those are your go, no-go kind of tests where you rely on the senses of the person taking it. Different types of qualitative fit tests. Challenge agents might be saccharin, which is sweet, Beatrix, which is sour, irritant smoke, or banana oil, which you can smell. So basically those tests, if the person tastes or smells or feels the test agent, then they fail. It's just pass or fail. A quantitative fit test uses a machine like on that slide, and it tests not only the concentration inside the respirator, but the concentration outside, and comes up with a fit factor, which you have to pass to allow you to wear that respirator, tell you it fits properly, basically. And this fit testing must be done annually and when you're initially assigned to wearing the respirator.
Or if there's any kind of facial changes, right, Rick, or gain of weight?
Yeah,
like
yeah. If you say you lose a lot of weight, you get your teeth knocked out and you need dentures. And OSHA prohibits facial hair when wearing a tight-fitting face piece respirator. So you got to be clean shaven.
So you can see where all of this is a very time-consuming process. We just want to make sure we reiterate that. And if you had to manage this in the past, which I've had on hazmat teams, and it can be a very painstaking process. Again, that's question number 6 on your check sheet. So, just want to make sure that we're talking about what all these things look like for you.
So every time someone puts on a respirator, OSHA says, and this is actually in the healthcare ETS, right, Deb? Didn't we just read that? You have to do
yes, it is.
a user seal check. That's not a fit test. It's when every time you put it on, you do this user seal check, which is either you check for a positive test where you puff out on the respirator to make sure it's sealing, and a negative check where you breathe in to see if there's any leaks, and you adjust it and try to get the best fit that you possibly can. This isn't done in lieu of the fit testing. It's done in addition to, and every time you put on a respirator, it should be performed.
Also make sure that for the user seal check, that's part of your training protocol, that you are covering that that's how people have to do it, and they should show you that they know how to do that.
We like to call it the battle of the beards. And this OSHA uses pretty strong language when it comes to this. It says the employer shall not permit respirators with tight-fitting face pieces to be worn by employees who have, and then facial hair that comes between the sealing surface of the face piece and the face, or that interferes with the valve function, or any condition that interferes with the face-to-face piece seal or valve function. So you do have to fight that battle of the beards, and people, if they're required to wear, now this is important too, if they're required to wear a respirator and it's a tight-fitting face piece respirator, they need to be clean shaving. No ifs, ands, or buts. But if it's voluntary use of a tight-fitting face piece respirator, and that basically tells you that means you've done the testing, there's no airborne hazards, there's no overexposures. So in a sense, there's really not a health hazard issue. It might be a comfort issue. In that case, you can wear the respirator voluntarily with facial hair.
Another point also is to make sure that you're not fit testing anyone who is not clean shaving. Again, you're prohibited from doing that. You can't do a fit test and pass a fit test if people have any kind of, facial hair, period. So just gonna throw that out there.
And Deb likes this slide. Go ahead, Deb.
Again, facial hair that interferes with the respirator. So when you're looking at where the seal is, you see the guy up there that says clean shaven with the arrow. We're looking at the seal that goes above the bridge of the nose, down around the cheekbones, and underneath the chin. That's where the respirator is sealing. we want to make sure that there is no, I mean, if they shave around where that perimeter is, fine, I'm good with that. They have to be clean shaven where that seal goes. I've had a lot of people try this, but I will tell you that they don't usually pass the test because it will not seal. I've had people that tried to put Vaseline on their face and then put a respirator on. That didn't work either.
Yeah.
I was like, fine, try it, but you're not going to pass it. So
this, yeah, you can download this from the Niosh site. Just go to the respiratory page. You can search it and click around. You can find this thing if you want to post it at your workplace.
Did y'all know there were so many different types of facial hair for men? I didn't know they were all these names either. I thought that was funny.
That's what I find interesting.
Now you learn what all these, I mean, I knew, some of these, but some of them were like, wow, I didn't know that. You learned something new today. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance, inspection, and storage of respirators. And again, this is critical for anything, whether it's a voluntary or whether it's a mandatory use of respirators. We want to follow the manufacturer's instructions and recommendations. You want to schedule to ensure respirators are clean, sanitary, and in good working condition. Now, once you issue them, I do recommend that somebody go out and routinely check, how are they being stored? Are they being maintained? Because we do a training annually, we give them the respirators, they say, okay, good, I'm done, they're out the door. And the next thing you know, you see them hanging up on a nail head, in the maintenance shop or by the paint booth. That's not proper storage. So be aware of that. Look at that. That's easy. That's low-lying fruit for OSHA to cite. They have to be inspected by the wearer prior to use, and they have to do that fit test again. Stored in a convenient, clean, and sanitary location. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Stored in a clean, convenient, and sanitary location, because I will tell you that is one that we see easy money for OSHA to cite. I can't tell you how many times I walked into a plant and seen a respirator just hanging on a nail head, and there's all kinds of stuff all over on the inside. Now that's the part they're breathing on. So again, make sure that you're looking at that, and then talk about clean and disinfecting procedure per Appendix B2.
Hey Deb, how much is the OSHA citation now? So if they see that respirator laying on that.
13,600 something, 42 or something like that. I can't remember. It just went up again. So again, that little citation could go as high as $13,000, over $13,000. So that could buy you a whole lot of respirators, or could put a good down payment on some kind of ventilation system. So look at it from that perspective. This one also is covered in the OSHA mini standard, so in the healthcare, so they have to make sure that they're maintaining that in clean and sanitary way. This covers questions 7 and 12 on the check sheet. And again, here's another one. Storage, clean and dry. I told you guys, I mean, this is, actually, I think these are photos that were my photos. Who all wants to raise your hand if you want to wear these respirators, or if you would wear them? Anybody volunteering? Again, this is elastomeric respirators. Do you train on Appendix D? This is question 14. So making sure that you don't want to store these this way. This is not clean and dry or protected, especially on the cartridge type filters, because those are made up, usually they have some kind of charcoal or medium in them. If we don't cover those, they're absorbing everything in the atmosphere all the time. There's no on-off switch. So we have to make sure we're storing them out of exposure.
All right, the reason, and this we just thought this was interesting, it goes back to the reason why your employees have to be trained on how to properly clean and maintain these respirators. Look at all the little moving, or not moving, but little parts that consist for this simple air purifying half mask respirator. You have, valves and coverings and straps, and all that stuff needs to be taken apart and cleaned. The only thing that keeps really you from being exposed to the environment sometimes on the exhalation valve is just a simple thin piece of rubber that goes in that valve. And if that's missing or damaged, Deb found one that was hard as a rock that served no purpose, basically, an exposure can occur. So employees need to be trained on how to properly take these things apart, put them back together.
Absolutely. Again, there's a lot of pieces, parts there. You got to be able to maintain them. I love this one. Go ahead, Rick. This is fun.
Yeah, one of our
We like
other
pictograms.
There's auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and then your visual learners right here. So basically, it's showing you the 9 steps to cleaning a respirator. First, you take it apart, then you wash it in mild soap, rinse it, dry it, and sanitize it, rinse it, dry it, put it back together, and test it, make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to be. So that's a good visual for your people.
Good visual, and you could use it for your training too.
Right.
So one of the other things that is a requirement of the respirator program is that you have a program administrator. And you heard me say earlier that whoever gets this lucky job, this lucky task, that's a lot. And it is I will say it's very time consuming and labor intense. So again, they have to have the assigned responsibility and authority for the respirator program. So that's somebody within your organization says, if we have a respirator program and a written program, somebody's going to administer that. They have to have appropriate training and experience, evaluate the respirator program's effectiveness, consult with employees wearing the respirators, maintain records and written procedures, and then they have to do the annual training and fit testing, or at least schedule that. So again, that's question number 8, but know that there's a lot of steps in there. And I know that you all, when you have people that are wearing respirators, they all get hired on the same day and get training on the same day. So you're only having to worry about that one time a year, right? Yeah, not. So again, when you're trying to manage a multitude of people wearing respirators and their annual training all comes due on different dates, it can get kind of crazy. So managing that is a big task. So your annual respirator training has to include some elements also, respiratory hazards and the effects if the respirator is not used properly. So not only do I have to tell them about what it can be used for, I have to talk to them about what can go wrong. Engineering and administrative controls that you have in place. The reasons and the need for the selection of the particular type of respirator that you selected, the functions and the capability and the limitations of that respirator, how to don and doff, or to basically to put on my respirator and then to remove it and then to do the seal check on it. Proper inspections and maintenance, that's why we had all those pieces, parts, to make sure, you're not always taking it apart, but you have to understand that you're looking at it and visually inspecting it prior to use. Medical signs and symptoms that may limit or prevent effective use, and then situations for use in emergencies, including a malfunction. So our program has to cover all that. We have to talk about that in training. Those questions 7 and 13 on your check sheet are covered on this slide.
Where'd the other picture go? Click it again.
Wait a minute. Let me click it again, because I think that's the weird one. Yep, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so this is check sheet 15 and 18. So which one of these in the chat, A or B, which one is a respirator? And I know you'll all get 100%, right? What are we seeing?
Bees. They're going with bees.
Good. Good job. You guys are paying good attention.
So remember the 9 steps out of the written program. We kind of simplified what you're required to do for mandatory programs and then voluntary programs. So if it's a mandatory program, overexposures, or you require it, you have to do all 9 steps that we listed in the written program. You need the full program. There's no exemption. If it's voluntary use and you're using any respirator other than the filtering face piece, so you're using either the PAPR or the elastomeric half or full face respirator, then you can do the 3-step program. So the 3 steps can be for voluntary use with the elastomeric respirators, what you have to do is train on Appendix D, which we'll talk about here in a second. You have to do a medical evaluation so the worker is fit to wear the respirator. And then you have to have written procedures on cleaning, storing, and maintaining that respirator. If you have a voluntary use situation where all you're using are the filtering face piece respirators or the N95, then you can go with the one-step program. And in that case, all you need to do is Appendix D, which is basically read and heed the instructions on the box so that the worker knows the uses and limitations of that respirator. Basically, it only filters out particulates, and when it gets dirty, throw it away. So what is voluntary use? It's when an employee chooses to wear the respirator, no exposure limit is exceeded, and the company does not require a respirator for the task. And that would be check sheet question number 9.
Good job.
Again, these are the respirators that would be covered under the 3-step and the 1-step, the half mask, the full face piece, helmet and hood. So it'd be yes to medical evaluations, no to fit testing because it's voluntary use, there's no airborne hazard, yes to the written procedures on maintenance and care and use, and yes to Appendix D. So for the filtering face piece, it's no to the medical evaluations, no to the fit testing, but yes to the training on Appendix D. So here's a big answering in the chat. I would do it for voluntary use of this respirator, which we determined was an N95. Which respirator program would meet OSHA requirements or sort of regulations?
You can either just put 9, 3, or 1. It doesn't matter. We'll know what you mean. Seeing any numbers in there, Carrie?
I see 3. I see 1. I see 3.
Okay.
What I got so far.
I must
Wake
have
up.
confused them.
We're almost done. Wake up.
I know it's painful. I'm sorry.
Go back one and give them the answer, Deb, again.
All right, 3,
you go
3,
back
3,
one
3.
slide.
I got lots of 3s. I got lots of 1s.
Yeah.
Here we go. What is it? Now, do we see anybody changing the 1s?
They would if they
filtering
could.
face piece, medical evaluation, fit testing, and training for Appendix D. So again, you can see the N95s down there. That's only for the 1-step. Got it?
Hey, we do have a question on this, guys, that just came in. And I know we may not have the answer yet, but it says when, and I'd say if the COVID ETS comes into play and now non-vax are required to wear masks, do they have to do a 1-step or a 9-step since it becomes mandatory? And so I guess the difference between face coverings and these respirators.
You got it, Carrie. The face coverings
Absolutely.
and masks are not respirators, so no, you don't have. None of this applies to that.
If they're using the face covering, but if they choose to wear an N95,
Yep, or you mandate
then
it.
you have to. Right.
right,
Then you'd have to
Then
do
you
the
would.
1-step.
right, absolutely. So they're correct.
Good question. Good question, Frank.
So this is the information. This is all Appendix D says. This is straight out of the standard, or the appendix, I should say. So it basically says read and heed the manufacturer's instructions on use, maintenance, cleaning, care, and warnings on respirator limitations. In other words, it only filters out particulates. It doesn't filter out gases or vapors. It doesn't provide oxygen, things like that. Choose to wear the Niosh certified respirators for voluntary use. Do not wear your respirator in atmospheres containing contaminants for which your respirator is not designed to protect against, and keep track of your respirator. Do not mistakenly use someone else's respirator. That's it for Appendix D. That's all you got to do. Of course, you probably want to do a little more than that.
And that is check sheet questions 14, 16, and 18. So we're almost done, folks. We are really there. I wanted to share again, this is the emergency temporary standard. Please get onto OSHA's website and kind of monitor this. They're giving some updates as we go. And that link has some information. Plus on this link, you can click, and when you click the emergency temporary standard in the red, it takes you to their webpage, and there are some fact sheets. At the end of one of the fact sheets, it gives you some additional information, some links that are in there at osha.gov. So there's information on the laws and regulations, enforcement policies, assistance materials, and guidance. So I just wanted to share that with y'all. And then just basically talk about what we've learned today. And we learned the elements of the Respirator Protection Program. We've learned you either have a mandatory or non-mandatory. And then, you know, we have different step programs depending on the type of respirator you're using. So we've also defined what is a respirator and what is OSHA up to regarding the COVID-19. And again, that's kind of an ongoing saga. So we're just going to leave it with that. And then we have questions. That's my little.
That doesn't even look real. That dog.
It doesn't. It looks fake.
No, he was real. He's no longer with us, but he's real.
Oh.
All right, I am not seeing any questions. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw them in chat. Stephanie just threw in our next safety council meeting is December 21st, and it is on lockout tagout. So make sure that you're bringing the right people. So if you have maintenance folks, it's going to be a good overview of lockout tagout and a good discussion. So yeah, and I agree, Shiloh, there's a lot of unanswered questions with the emergency temporary standard. And so we're all kind of sitting here on pause, seeing what's happening with that. Absolutely. And Stephanie also put her contact information and my contact information. And if you have questions for Deb and Rick, and since they're so scary and you were afraid to ask them, we could hook you up with them as well if that is needed. But with that, it is 12:59. If there's no further questions, I say thank you. If you guys could, a round of applause for Deb and Rick. So use your reaction tools one last time. That would be great. Look at all that. They loved you. Thank you so much, guys. And Stephanie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, that's why I threw the next date up in there and our contact information. So we're good.
So the question, shouldn't the checklist have a no answer? And I guess the answer to that is no, because if the answer is no, then you probably need to do it to make it a yes. Or you stop doing the checklist. But
Again,
no, that's a good one. We can look at that and maybe update it.
That checklist is out there as a guidance for you to make sure and to review your own written programs, for at least your respirator program. So, and feel free to edit it however.
Yeah, you can use it as your tool. Definitely.
That's right.
All right, thank you guys. Have a good Thanksgiving. Enjoy the snow. Watch the video for slips and falls on ice and how to walk on ice. Yep.
Walk like
Thank
a duck.
you guys. Yeah, walk like a duck.
Bye,
It talks
everyone.
about that, or a penguin.
Yeah.